Number 4, Al-Istimnaa. Istimnaa is masturbation. This is one of the acts that invalidate the fast. And not only does it invalidate the fast, but it also warrants Kaffara. So if this act occurs in the month of Ramadan, this person must make up the fast on another day and also pay the Kaffara, which is feeding 60 people or fasting 2 consecutive months. Now, the author speaks about a few rulings over here when it comes to this issue. First of all, masturbation is haram in the religion of Islam for both men and women. There are some, and you'll find some today, are bringing this research that there is no evidence that masturbation for females is haram. Because all the hadiths that we have, they are talking about males engaging in this act. How do we respond to that? Yes, those hadiths from the Ahlul Bayt that do address males engaging in that behavior do mention males. They don't mention the females. But the verse in the Holy Qur'an, such as in Surah Al-Muminun and in other verses, are very clear that any type of sexual activity outside of marriage and the lawful partner is haram. This is a general verse that applies to this case. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. Allah describes the believers. One of the descriptions of the believers is what? They guard their private parts. Okay, there's an exception. إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ. Except on their lawful partners. If it's with their lawful partners, that's fine. That's not a violation. فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى. Look at this verse very clearly. فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ. If someone pursues anything beyond that. Beyond what? Beyond those two. أَزْوَاجُهُمْ, their spouses, their wives. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, or they had lawful slaves. Anything outside of these two, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. The Qur'an says they're transgressors. They're violating the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Most scholars historically have considered masturbation to fall under this category. It's exceeding and trespassing that line. Because the Qur'an limits sexual activity to only these two. Anything outside of that would be considered a violation of Islamic law. So that in itself is proof. So today what you see, some people are bringing research. No, there is no evidence for that. There is no hadith for that. No. We have a verse in the Holy Qur'an that's very clear.
Because even that verse says, وَعَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُم. It refers to the guys more than the girls. It's refers to the male more than the female. First of all, أَزْوَاجِهِمْ in Arabic is neutral. It applies to the husband and the wife. The argument here, the verse says, everything is haram except with a spouse, applies to men and women, or your slave. Okay, that applies to men only. If you pursue anything more than these two, anything, a third category is haram. Okay, isn't masturbation a third category? It is.
So then the Qur'an says, humul adun. That's a violation of the law of Allah. Even if that second one that the verse mentions, malakat aymanuhum, let's say that applies to men only. Fine. There's a category that's only applicable to men. But the verse is saying anything more than these two is outlawed. So this is a clear verse, according to mainstream scholars, that outlaws masturbation, even for females. So we don't need a specific hadith about this, because that's the argument. We search the hadith, we don't find anything specific in the hadiths that addresses females, then it's halal. There's no such argument, because the Holy Qur'an clearly outlaws this. فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ. Anything beyond what's mentioned, and what's mentioned in the verse, spouse or slave. Anything outside of that, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. And the verse, the tone of it is very general. There are even some scholars, they said, no, the verse is talking about adultery. It's a given that it's talking about adultery, not other types of behavior. But most scholars have said, no, why limit it to adultery? The Qur'an is talking about حفظ الفرج, guarding, protecting the private part. That's general, whether there's another person involved or not. So this is a scholarly discussion that scholars do have. But you will find some who are trying to make the case that no, the Qur'an does not make a reference to that. And this is only limited to, let's say, fornication or adultery. That's فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ. But most scholars consider it to be a very general verse. What is your understanding of the verse? Do you see it limited just to any acts with someone else? Or no, it's general. حفظ الفرج, protecting the chastity of the private part, is general. It can include any type of sexual activity. Any type of sexual activity, whether with a human being or someone with himself or with an animal. All of that is outlawed by the verse. We don't need any hadith for that. You don't need a specific hadith for that. And if we have specific hadiths, they're just confirming the verse. Or no, you find that you need elaboration on that. The verse is not clear. The verse is only stating that, let's say, fornication, adultery is haram. It's not talking about other categories. What's your take on it?
It's general.
It's general. Most scholars have seen it general. And if you give this phrase to the average person in public, حفظ الفرج فروجهم حافظون, they will understand it in a general context. Let me give you this example. Let's say the master issued this command. He tells his subjects, احفظ فرجك, guard your private parts, protect your private parts. That's all that was said, and there was no clarification on what that meant. Now, let's say one of those subjects engaged in masturbation. Did they violate that command or no? What do you say? If you see it clearly as a violation of that command, that means it includes it. It's general enough to include it. Now, there's a difference between males and females. The difference is the following. Obviously, the Istimnaa, the masturbation that does invalidate the fast, if there's a discharge of semen, then that would invalidate the fast according to the hadiths. With females, scholars have multiple opinions. But the mainstream opinion of Maraja today is if that it leads to excessive discharge, then that in itself will invalidate the fast, and that would require the ghusl. So this is the mainstream opinion of the Maraja today. The author on page 14 also talks about another act that could invalidate the fast. The act is the following. He talks about foreplay. If a person engages in foreplay, and as a result, there's a discharge of semen, does that invalidate the fast or not? The Imam ﷺ here comments. He says if this person did not think that through foreplay there will be a discharge of semen, there will be ejaculation, then yes. In that case, the fasting is valid because it was not deliberate. But if this person kind of knew, anticipated, expected, or had experienced before, that if he engages in any type of foreplay, there's a high risk or chance of him becoming a Mujnib. In that case, this is considered deliberate breaking of the fast. It invalidates the fast, and it also warrants Kaffara. So, the author does also share a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam about that. The final point before we go to the fifth one is if someone becomes Mujnib while sleeping. Does that invalidate the fast? According to scholars, that does not invalidate the fast because that was not deliberate. Yes, because a person is in the state of Janaba, they have to quickly do the ghusl after they wake up. But their fast on that day is considered valid. So this is an exception to the rule which states if there is ejaculation, that breaks the fast. If that happened while sleeping, that does not